what is a hadith that is authentic? What are the conditions for a hadith to be authentic?
Firstly, in here, the Encyclopedia of Islam is saying we can't know.
No, I'm telling you, what are the conditions that we use to say that a hadith is authentic?
He
Because
says.
It says so-and-so said to so-and-so, who lived and was born in some time, and was living at the time of the person from whom he received it. And this person was reliable and trustworthy, as you get from the biographies that were attributed to them. But all those biographies are written for 300, 200 at least years after those men about whom the biographies were written had died. You can't get valid biographical information 200 years later. So the hadith are in toto worthless as historical documents.
That's the mistake. In total, it's not accurate. So it's true that there are fabrications out there, hadith, that it's not even that they have a chain of narration. No, they're complete lies. They're lies. And there's people that use this hadith because they don't know they are lies and they are spread. And you may come a lot of Muslims and they tell you, oh, there is this hadith that says this. And you're like, subhanAllah, this is completely fabrication.
I'm talking about the accepted books of Bukhari now. We know this. Exactly. Bukhari had 600,000, he whittled down to 7,000. So I know what you're talking about. This is addressing the alleged hadith, the alleged authentic hadiths. It's saying the Western scholars don't care about the ones Muslims have dismissed. They're going after the ones that Muslims say are genuine, the Sahih ones.
That things that are Sahih. What is not authentic? Narrated from Abdullah ibn Umar to Nafi to Imam Malik. That chain of narration. What is not authentic?
All right. The question is, for a Western scholar, how can you know those men narrated it to each other?
What do you mean a Western scholar? Someone that disbelieves in the Quran?
Nobody in a Western university regards the hadith system as a way of knowing anything about the past. I won't read again. I could read another from the Wiley Blackwell, and Wiley Blackwell is a very sound academic publishing house, and they produced an introduction to the hadith, and a big chunky book, and in that they basically, and the scholars in the West who look at the hadith say that all this gives you extreme, those who really like much Moltke and what do we got? Yeah, Motsky, Schurler, Gurkha. These are major hadith scholars in the West, and they argue over what you can know, how far back you can go with the hadith criticism, and how you can produce models to try and assess whether this Islamic tradition is valid. But even they all say that when the fruits of this kind of research yields next to nothing of historical information about Muhammad and his life, and that of his companions. So what we're saying is that no matter what you do in terms of what you regard as the science of hadith, it's all worthless from an historical point of view. When we talk about historical science in the West, true history is not what you guys believe it is.
Get it, and this example that I gave you, Abdullah ibn Umar to Nafi to Malik.
How do you know they're valid? Those men transmitted.
That's why I'm asking you.
They didn't transmit. The only way you know they transmitted is by a hadith which is produced in writing 200 to 250 years after the event. The names of those transmitters are given not at the time they're transmitted, but 200 to 250 years after the event, and the biographies of these men as authentic transmitters are given 200 years at least after those men lived.
So you're telling
That's the problem. You've got a yawning 2-century gulf at least between these alleged facts and the writing down of them. In our historical, it's like me saying, oh, the Battle of Waterloo took place in 1815, and the Duke of Wellington led the British Army, or the English Army, and Blucher led the Germans against Napoleon, who led the French, and he was the Emperor of France. And nothing at all was written about the Battle of Waterloo between 1815 and 2022. And I'm now telling you, I've just written it down here. Do you believe me? You say, get lost. It's 200 years between the event, and you telling me we have nothing in between.
That's the thing. Now I'm telling you then. Who's making it up?
And if I say, oh, don't worry, I know that the Duke of Wellington passed it to the Duke of York, who said it to Prince Albert, who said it to Queen Victoria, and I'm saying to this now. I've written it down now, 2 centuries later.
Okay,
how can it have any validity? The information you give me is not valid.
Why is that important, the writing?
What?
Why is that important, the writing? Abdullah bin Umar did not write it for nothing, and did not write it for Imam Malik. They told each other.
You say they told each other, but the statement that they told each other is only written 200 years after they allegedly told each other.
Why does it matter that it's written? First of all, some hadith were written before that. Like,
well, give us the earliest written hadith.
Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As. He wrote a hadith, and there is a hadith that says explicitly that the Prophet said, yeah, wrote.
Right, which collection is it in?
This specific hadith, I think it may be in the Bukhari, but I'm not sure.
In what?
Sahih Bukhari, I think, but I'm
Well,
not sure.
but this is the point. My point is this: it doesn't matter which of the major collection it's in. Bukhari wrote 200 to 250 years after the event, so that hadith is only written for the first time. Then,
okay, it doesn't matter. Why the transmitted tradition is not valid?
because the transmitted tradition is only written down about 200 years later.
Why is it important that it's written down?
It's important that it's written down because otherwise you should believe me if I talk about the Battle of Waterloo 200 years after it took place without any writings about it. They're contemporary.
Exactly. So now I write something that, oh, that building is mine, and I show the paper written down, and you will believe that.
No, because that building exists now. I could go to that building and see it exists now, or I could go to deeds in the land registry. You say which says who owns that building. You haven't got any existing edifice for me to look at now.
So having it written down or in memory is no difference. Because
No.
even if it's written down, you will reject it. So.
No, if it was written, if the Muslims could say, right, 20 years after Muhammad died, we've got written documents about what he said and what he did, other than the Quran. We've got various written documents about his life, his battles, and so on. 20 years after he died, but no, we don't, because the information you have is in the Sirah and the Hadith. What have we got today? It's what we've got today that I'm talking about. Well, what we've had from the Middle Ages, in fact. What's come down to us